Time to accept that it was a mistake to give up on fracking? There's a question. Richard Tice is my guest. Also, as interest rates go up for the second time in as many months, we talk to Kelvin Mackenzie about whether this comes even close to the days of Black Wednesday. And as the sci-fi blockbuster Dune is nominated for 11 BAFTAs, we ask if cinema is bouncing back from lockdown. I'll be joined in the studio throughout the show by the economist Vicky Price. But first, we have the headlines for you with Polly.
Good afternoon, just after 4 o'clock. I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. And the cost of living is set to soar for millions of households across the UK, with the energy regulator Ofgem today announcing a 54% rise in the price cap on domestic fuel. Those on default tariffs paying by direct debit will see their bills go up by nearly £700. And prepayment customers face annual charges of more than £2,000. The change will be introduced from April the 1st, affecting around 22 million customers. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, says he'll give households in council tax bands A to D an extra £350 to ease the burden.
It is not sustainable to keep holding the price of energy artificially low. For me to stand here and pretend we don't have to adjust to paying higher prices would be wrong and dishonest. But what we can do is take the sting out of a significant price shock for millions of families by making sure the increase in prices is smaller initially and spread over a longer period.
Rishi Sunak, well, the shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is accusing the government of forcing households to load up even more costs in the long run.
A buy now, pay later scheme that loads up costs for tomorrow. High prices as far as the eye can see. This year, next year and the year after that. Give with one hand now and take it all back later.
Well, on top of that, people are also facing higher mortgages following a rise in interest rates. The Bank of England's trying to curb inflation, which is set to hit 1.25%, according to some forecasts. The Monetary Policy Committee voted to raise rates to 0.5% and signalled more hikes are on the way. It marks the central bank's first back-to-back increase since June 2004. And some breaking news for you. The head of Number 10's policy unit, Munira Mirza, who was Boris Johnson's aide for 14 years, has reportedly resigned today. That comes after the Prime Minister claimed Keir Starmer, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, used his time prosecuting journalists and failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile. In a letter to Boris Johnson reported by The Spectator magazine, Miss Mirza wrote, "I believe it was wrong to imply that Sir Keir Starmer was personally responsible." Northern Ireland's First Minister, Paul Givan, is expected to resign at some point today. It comes amid increasing tensions over the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Officials have been ordered to stop agri-food checks, which the EU says is a breach of international law. Boris Johnson says practical common sense is needed to move forward.
What we've got to do is get to a sensible solution that recognises that it's crazy to have checks on goods that are basically circulating within the single market of the United Kingdom. Now, we can do that, but without having a full panoply of checks.
Boris Johnson. Meanwhile, hauliers are calling for clarity following the order to stop Brexit checks. Northern Ireland Policy Manager for Logistics UK, Seamus Lehaney, says the sector has no idea what's going on.
There was a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety with businesses. They weren't too sure what they had to do. Did they still have to fulfil the administration with regards to moving products of plant and animal origin in here? Generally, the advice this morning from government departments is that you must still complete the paperwork to move goods in here. I'm not really too sure what's happening at the border control posts. We've not been told what's happening yet and what staff is actually doing anything.
Seamus Lehaney. Well, in international news today, the US President Joe Biden says the ISIS leader is no more. His words after a raid in Syria. Abu Ibrahim al-Qureshi reportedly detonated a bomb Just as US forces approached during an overnight raid, he killed himself and at least 13 others in the act, including his own wife and children. There were no US casualties reported. The US president called it a final act of cowardice. He expressed his gratitude at the skill of the US forces, saying the operation was testament to America's capability to take out terrorist threats, adding he's determined to protect the American people.
We remain vigilant. We remain prepared. Last night's operation took a major terrorist leader off the battlefield, and it sent a strong message to terrorists around the world. We will come after you and find you. Once again, today, we continue our unceasing effort to keep the American people safe and to strengthen the security of our allies and partners around the world.
Joe Biden. You're with GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now more from Brazier.
Today's main news story in 4 words: prepare to be poorer. Interest rates doubled today. Energy bills will rise by almost £700 a year for the average family. And the Bank of England said inflation is ready to rise to more than 7%. Well, the Daily Mail, its headline said it all a little earlier today, this afternoon. Britain's Day of Pain. The paper claimed that events amounted effectively to a Black Thursday, a throwback to the day in 1992 when interest rates went through the roof. And the Conservative government at the time of the day, led by one John Major, lost the confidence of voters. It was a moment summed up by one front page in particular, the front page of The Sun newspaper. Let's show it to you if we can. We haven't got it. You can imagine it. And here's somebody who can remember it because he probably wrote it, the editor of The Sun then, Kelvin Mackenzie, who joins me now. Hi to you, Kelvin. Welcome.
Hi there, man.
We'll come on to the cost of living crisis in just a second, but this being breaking news, this being a news channel, we're going to deal with the news of the hour. This concerns Munira Mirza, Chief Policy Advisor at Number 10. If you don't mind, I'm just going to read the statement that she's issued. The letter, it's in The Spectator. They've got hold of it. It's their scoop. It's a little lengthy, but it's worth, I think, repeating in verbatim in full.
Yep.
She says, I believe it was wrong for you, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, to imply this week that Keir Starmer was personally responsible for allowing Jimmy Savile to escape justice. There was no fair or reasonable basis for that assertion. This was not the usual cut and thrust of politics. It was an inappropriate and partisan reference to an horrendous case of child sex abuse. You tried to clarify your position today, but despite my urging, you did not apologise for the misleading impression you gave. She sounds pretty furious, and she's gone. Does it matter?
No, she's just another policy advisor, and I thought that Boris was entirely correct. The point he was making was everybody's always blaming me, and for everything that happens, they say leadership does matter. And all that Boris was effectively saying was, well, you were the leader of the Crown Prosecution Service when there was a failure to prosecute the biggest child abuser probably of modern times. And so anyway, she's gone. It doesn't matter. The problem really is that Boris affects to be like Trump, but he's not really Trumpian. Because if he were Trumpian, he would come out right now and saying her best days were behind her. She was annoyed because somebody got passed over. This government will do a lot better without her and give her the old wallop on the way out herself. But instead of that, he will say, I'm very sorry that she's gone. She was a great colleague and all the rest of it. And I'm sorry. There are probably good reasons to quit this Boris government, but the Jimmy Savile one was not one of them.
You make a very good comparison with the way the Trump White House would have handled this. They saw every threat as an opportunity to leverage and throw it back in the face of their opposition, their opponents, and it would always galvanise their base. Boris Johnson doesn't have that kind of base, does he? In terms of what support he does have and what support he can still muster, this time yesterday, I was telling the viewers that Tobias Ellwood was a Guinean. There was another MP for Totnes who literally within the hour while we were on air had said he'd lost his confidence in the Prime Minister. It feels, Kelvin, at the moment there is this daily drip of loss of support for the Prime Minister.
Yes, I'm afraid these look like pretty dark days. And you talk about the Black Friday back in 92. The truth about the matter was that was a catastrophe by Major, which he paid for some 5 years later by the Tories being wiped out by Blair in the most incredible way. And I suspect that if Boris is still in power in the May elections, you are going to see the most devastating wipeout in political history. It wouldn't surprise me if they basically lost every single council that they stood for. And so these are very, very difficult days. And let me say this to you, that if in that May election there was the wipeout, don't even think about it. Boris would be gone in a heartbeat. He wouldn't have to worry about 54. There'd be 300 MPs coming against him. So we're seeing this now. I don't think the departure of some policy wonk, right, from number 10 matters a damn. Yes, gas bills, they matter. Actually, I admire what the government are trying to do. I mean, we haven't got much money. The reason we're in the cart is not only over gas, it's that we were funded furlough way beyond times when it was necessary. We gave all this billions away in bounce back loans and the like. And now that there is no money to pay anybody anything. So actually, taxes have to go up. So these are very difficult times. Boris himself has been unhelpful to himself.
They're difficult times. They're strange times as well, aren't they? I mean, who would have thought when you were editing The Sun that the Labour Party, as it now is, has parked its fiscal tanks on the government's lawn, and it's saying, for instance, we would not implement the 1.25% national insurance rise, and we would cut VAT on fuel bills.
Well, they're just talking cobblers. There has to be some money. Every family knows there has to be something in the bank to pay the bills. The truth about the matter is, I wish to God we didn't have to put the 1.25%, but we paid all this money out in furlough. Our sterling will simply collapse unless we raise some money in terms of taxes. Now, I know some people don't agree with that, but you know, I do understand them trying to balance the books. But the problem is we've got a political crisis and a financial crisis running at the same time. And the political crisis, although I understand Partygate doesn't matter, when you throw that in with everything else that's going on in our country right now, then people are saying, you know, what should we do? I'll tell you what we do. We'll kick the cat. We'll throw out the Prime Minister. Well, you should be careful what you wish for, because does anybody honestly believe that either Truss or I tell you, the most likely person to become leader of the next Conservative Party will be Jeremy Hunt, and then we'll have a Remainer running the joint. I mean, the whole thing is not being helped by some missteps by Boris. I'm very, very upset with him. Yeah.
I promised our viewers and indeed our listeners that front page when Britain crashed out of the ERM in 1992. I think we can put it up now. And if you are listening on DAB radio, I'll just tell you what it says at the top of the page. Can we flash it up? There we go. This is when Kelvin Mackenzie was editing The Sun. Now we've all been screwed by the cabinet. Was that your headline, Kelvin, by the way, as we look at that?
It was, but the reason that it was apposite in this particular case is because there was because of the David Mellor issue. Yeah, well, which we haven't got, sadly,
Antonio de Sancha. But what I'm trying to draw the viewers' attention to and the listeners' attention to is the strapline at the very top, which reminds people through the course of a day, and it beautifully expresses it, what was happening with interest rates, 10% and above. At one stage. Now, the point I'm trying to make to people listening is that actually that was a crisis. That in a day, there was crystallised everything that was inept about that particular government. This is different, isn't it? There hasn't been one terrible day for the Boris Johnson government. Not that compares with that.
No. But one of the problems is that Boris doesn't seem on top of it. You know, the Macmillan events issue. So he doesn't seem to be on top of these issues. These issues and events seem to catch him out, and his reaction, he's probably completely lost confidence, and then he has to go upstairs and be told by Carrie what he should be thinking. You know, these are massively difficult times. Look, I agree with you about interest rates. Interest rates, historic lows. Yeah. And if you think the interest rates are bad now, you just wait about another 6 to 9 months. Those interest rates will be at least double where we are right now. You cannot suppress inflation with literally 0.5% of an interest rate.
OK. Kelvin Mackenzie, really good to talk to you. I'm sure we'll talk again soon, but really appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed.
Okay, man. Cheers.
Kelvin Mackenzie there, just speculating on interest rates and mortgage rates, where they're going to be in a wee while. Vicky Price is an economist and our studio guest throughout the course of the next 2 hours. Where will they go?
Well, we've just heard the prediction that they'll be double where they are now. Double where they are now is 1%. It's not 14%, which is what they reached before. So we shouldn't get too panicky about this. And I think what the Bank of England felt was that they had to be seen to be taking inflation seriously, and they had to have some impact on inflationary expectations. But in reality, there's very little they can do on the energy price front, which is what's causing the rise in inflation.
Just very briefly, when you hear Kelvin Mackenzie joke about Carrie upstairs, calling the shots, pulling the levers, it's an old trope, the old Lady Macbeth slur, isn't it? Well, is there any truth in it? Is it simply none of our business? Well, it's kind of our business a bit, isn't it?
Well, a lot has been written suggesting that she does indeed have quite a lot of power, which is not particularly surprising, frankly. But I actually think that the departure of the advisor, who I was reading her statement, Munira Mirza, who left.
Munira
Mirza, who left today, said yes, is actually much more important than it has been suggested, because of course she was very close to Boris Johnson. So she has been with him for quite some time while he was still, when he was mayor of London. She's been running his policy unit for some time, and that's a very important part of the number 10 machinery. So you just wonder what actually is happening. And you talked about the security of the Prime Minister as well and what happens with all those MPs. It's interesting that the Jimmy Savile issue has been mentioned by a number as the reason why they've now decided to hand in their letters to the 1922
Well,
committee.
we're going to be talking to a Conservative MP next, and that might be something we touch on for now, though. Vicky Price, thanks very much indeed. Well, the government blames the rising international price of gas for the soaring cost of fuel in the UK, but there are those who say this is a largely self-inflicted crisis, our over-reliance on sustainable energy when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, and our neglect of other forms of fuel. 50 years ago, a little bit more perhaps, Britain was a world leader in nuclear technology. Now we are winding it down, and new projects rely on the French or the Chinese. We've set our face against shale gas extraction, even though fracking yielded an economic revolution in America. And as if that wasn't bad enough, we're subsidising those wind turbines and solar farms with cash that comes from fuel bills, your fuel bills, the so-called green levies. Joining me now, Craig McKinley, the Conservative MP for South Thanet, who's got strong views on this and indeed is the chairman of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group of MPs. Craig McKinley, good of you to join us. Before we get into the fuel crisis and whether those green levies ought to be scrapped, as I suspect you probably think should be, can we just deal with this immediate political crisis, if that's what it is? For the Prime Minister to lose his head of policy on a point of principle, it's not a great look.
No, I know they go back a very, very long time. And I think she's been a very good support to the Prime Minister. I think all the time he's been in Downing Street and long before. So, yeah, I don't know how significant it is. It's a shame. She was always, when you look across the advisors in Downing Street, I think I would have always put her down in the, the very supportive, properly thinking, properly conservative. So, yeah, I'm sure she's a loss to the team. But, at the end of the day, people do come and go. It's, linked apparently to the mentioning of Jimmy Savile. Well, I mean, that's just what it is. It is cut and thrust of politics. In a way, I thought
is that what you, Craig? Is that what you insisted is? Because
a little bit grubbier than I would have used, but
is it? I mean, it's interesting you use that word, isn't it? I mean, do you think it was a mistake for the Prime Minister to do that in the House?
Well, I mean, just looking back from this, you've got Keir Starmer have been blaming Boris Johnson for everything that went on in Downing Street, whether he was, because he's deemed to be the boss. And I think from the PM's point of view, he's blaming Keir Starmer because he was the boss of a very powerful organisation. He was the Director of Public Prosecution. So I think it was just a bit of mirroring one to the other. But, so it wasn't entirely unacceptable. It's just perhaps not somewhere I would have gone personally.
I think, to be fair to Keir Starmer, he would say that it wasn't on his watch, strictly speaking. The decisions were taken by others. Taking your point Craig McKinley that he was ultimately, the person with whom the buck stopped. He did commission an inquiry into what happened in terms of that Savile investigation. That debate will rage on. Maybe there'll be more resignations, who knows. Look, we booked you to talk about today's soaring fuel bills. Let's just break this down point by point. When you look at getting on for almost £2,000 a year now that the average household will pay in fuel bills, around about £170 of that goes in green levies and subsidies. Is that a reasonable figure?
Well, in the run-up, we knew today was going to happen. We knew the price rise was going to be around about 50%. It's now been declared as 54%. So I've been throwing into the pot of government my thoughts about how that could be ameliorated, because we knew there'd be some sort of scheme. And it seemed to me reducing VAT would have been an obvious one. I know it's only pretty scant relief, about £60 worth, but it had the benefit of being a Brexit dividend that we've been talking about for a long time. That VAT on fuel was an EU requirement. Once it's on, you can't take it off. We're out the EU now. It would have been a useful Brexit dividend. But, the far bigger amount on our fuel bills is the green levies, the environmental levies. So, if this renewable energy is so good, why is it so expensive? And it doesn't seem to be able to stand up on its own without a very big subsidy from the rest of us. That doesn't seem to me to be a very sensible means of energy policy, which is costing the lower paid a very high proportion of their take-home pay. So it seemed to me that was the better way of doing it. But saying that, to Rish's credit, he's come up with quite a novel scheme. Not the way I'd have done it, but the loan scheme is rather complex, and is predicated. Now, this is where it could all go horribly wrong, Colin. Is predicated on energy prices being lower in the future. So we'll get a discount now, but we'll have to pay that discount back in the future, with the hope that energy prices will fall, and that extra £40 we have to pay a year over 5 years will not be so painful. Now, so there's a big if over that. Yeah. There is the quite novel, I must say, the A to D on council tax will get a £150 rebate. Yeah, I think that is preferable than just an extra cash to the lower paid, because I suppose it is linked to the size of your property on the assumption that if you're lower paid, you're likely to be in an A to D council tax property. So I think that was quite novel. But let's just take the maths down on this. £6 billion is the loan scheme to the energy companies. £3 billion is the rest of it. Whether that's a £150 million discretionary fund to local councils. But there's going to be a windfall VAT of £1 billion. So the real cost to the Treasury on this whole scheme is £2 billion. So it's not perhaps quite as generous as we first thought. I knew something was around the corner, but are we just papering over the cracks, putting sticking plaster on a fundamental problem of our energy supply? We've seen we do not have proper energy security. It's certainly not affordable. Is there a better way? And I think there is a better way. Mother Nature gave this country a very special gift, and that's lots of gas. What is the point in importing gas when we have the opportunity to take out a bit of price volatility? We need greater energy storage, gas storage we've closed down over the last few years, and we put that moratorium on fracking. Now, just putting fracking aside for a moment, the North Sea has plenty of reserves it could yield up. And yet, what have we seen over the last few months? We've seen field after field being refused for assent. There was a little bit of brightness last night. There was one very small field, the Abigail field, going to be run by an Israeli oil company, has actually been given the green light. But it's a very small field and it won't last very long. But these are the type of things we need to do. Now, let's put this on geopolitics. Why on earth would Europe be buying gas from Putin with that power he actually, puts across us in terms of keeping the lights on and the wheels of business turning, and then giving him those billions and billions of pounds and euros to actually have a standing army of some size and advanced weapons on the gates of Europe? It makes no sense at all when we have the answer under our feet.
Well, it's a subject we will revisit, I'm sure, and those increasing prices will make people, I think, reconsider the calculations, especially around fracking. So, Craig McKinley, I'm sure it's something we'll talk to you again about in the future, but appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Just a couple more items in relation to what's happening in Downing Street right now. Who knows what's happening inside Downing Street? But we do know that Munira Mirza, head of policy, she's been serving Boris Johnson for 14 years loyally. Not loyal anymore. She's written a resignation letter to the Prime Minister. It's about his comments in the House of Commons last week when he invoked the memory of the Jimmy Savile inquiry and suggested that Keir Starmer should have done more to prosecute Jimmy Savile. She has resigned today. Letter leaked to the Spectator, scoop for them. Dominic Cummings has just tweeted, moral courage, he says, from Munira, who has done her best to make progress with a professional team throughout the horror since 11/20. It's a signal that the bunker is collapsing, says Dominic Cummings. We've got a name for the replacement from Munira Mirza. We haven't got time to share it with you. We'll do that after the break. And also after the break, the Nightingale ward, which cost more than £10 million to set up, but they only admitted a handful of patients. We'll look at that story for you. But first, the weather.
Hello again. Mild today, but a big change on the way. Tomorrow, it's going to feel an awful lot colder. A wet and windy spell will push across the country overnight, and that will introduce the colder and, in places, more wintry weather from this cold front. There it is, sweeping south, moving away the mild air that's been with us for a number of days and introducing much colder air, feeling colder still with the strength of the wind. There's the weather front pushing into the northwest tonight. Heavy rain for a time and some snow over the hills, and it sinks southwards into northern England and Wales, so a spell of an hour or two of heavy rain, followed by some hill snow. And the showers turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Things could turn icy here as temperatures tumble. Staying mild, though, across the southeast for the time being. But as this band of wet weather sinks south across the Midlands, then into parts of East Anglia and the southeast, there could be a little bit of snow for a time. Not expected to cause too many issues, but you may see that in the morning. Ice is a bigger hazard across western Scotland and Northern Ireland, with showers here on Friday morning. And again, a mixture of sleet, hail and some snow. The snow is only really expected to build up over hills. Sunny spells for many then during Friday, but there will be showers almost anywhere. And again, they'll have a wintry flavour to them, and it will feel a lot colder. That cold feel continues through Friday evening. The showers will tend to fade, though, in most places. And then we're looking at more wet weather coming into the northwest on Saturday. As that hits the colder air, that will have a bit of snow mixed in again for a time across parts of Scotland, but looking like outbreaks of rain and drizzle for Northern Ireland, Northern England, pushing into Wales on Saturday. Much of the south and east of England staying dry and bright for most of the day. But it's going to be windy again, and that'll be the case throughout this weekend. Sunday, again, windy with a bit more patchy rain across the south, some further wintry showers across the north. Weather chopping and changing quite a bit at the moment. Bye for now.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Inflation could be as high as 7.25% come April. So said the Bank of England today. Vicky Price, the economist, is alongside me. People need to keep up with inflation. Will they get paid more? There's the question.
Well, it's very interesting that we've seen wages go up. They are now rising by something like 4.2, 4.3%. And I do apologise about this, which is very unfortunate.
It happened yesterday.
It
Not
did.
with you, it was somebody else.
And our head actually switched it all off, and for some reason it decided to start again. But what you have seen, though, is that, first of all, this average increase of 4-point-something%, it depends, of course, on, we'll get some data again pretty soon on what's happening more recently. But it's certainly not anything like as high as the rate of inflation already, because the rate of inflation is 5.4% and it will be going up. Now, the question is, will those wage increases also follow suit? The reality is that loads and loads of companies with all this extra cost cannot give those wage increases that will make up for this inflation. And what is more, despite the fact we've lost quite a lot of people back to the EU post-Brexit and vacancies at a record highs, what you find is that, in fact, many sectors are paying very little in terms of increases. So if you look at manufacturing, lagging behind just over 2%. Even hospitality, we hear some figures for some companies paying more, but not really overall. And in fact, in many cases, they're also shedding labour, like we've seen that in the retail sector happening. Tesco, for example, just announced something. Where you have the increase is not, yes, HGV drivers a little bit perhaps, but they're a very small number there, is in the finance sector and business services. The rest are way below the rate of inflation, and that's going to be a serious problem in terms of affordability over the next year.
Yeah. The days of industrial strife and collective bargaining and strong trade unions feel like an old age away, don't they? You didn't skip a beat there, by the way. Brilliant when your phone went off. Thanks, Vicky. We're going to bring you the rest of the day's headlines now with Polly.
Colin, thank you. Just after 4:30, I'm Polly Middlehurst, and your top stories. Millions of households are to be given £350 to ease the burden of rising energy costs. That comes as the regulator, Ofgem, announces a 54% rise in the price cap on domestic fuel. Those on default tariffs paying by direct debit will see their bills go up by nearly £700. And prepayment customers face annual charges of more than £2,000. The changes will be introduced on the 1st of April, as you can see there. Now, the Bank of England has raised interest rates to 0.5% and signalled more hikes could be on the way as it tries to curb inflation. It marks the central bank's first back-to-back increase rates rise even since June 2004. The head of Number 10's policy unit and Boris Johnson's aide for 14 years, Munira Mirza, has resigned. It comes after the Prime Minister claimed Sir Keir Starmer, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile. In a letter to Boris Johnson reported by The Spectator, she wrote, "It was wrong to imply Sir Keir Starmer was personally responsible." Downing Street have confirmed the MP Andrew Griffith will take over the role as head of the Number 10 policy unit. Northern Ireland's First Minister Paul Givan is expected to resign at some point today. It comes amid increasing tensions over the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Officials were ordered to stop agri-food checks. That's potentially a breach of international law. Hauliers are calling for clarity now, as lorries are still being received, but it's not clear whether inspections are going ahead. And the US President Joe Biden says the ISIS leader is no more after a raid in Syria. Abu Ibrahim al-Quraishi reportedly detonated a bomb just as US forces approached during an overnight raid. He killed himself and at least 13 others, including his wife and his children. There were no US casualties reported. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you are with GB News. We're back after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, never quite sure whether these stories are inside the Westminster bubble that make not a lot of difference to anybody else. But Munira Mirza, perhaps you've not heard of Munira, but she is a figure of significance politically, has been the policy advisor at Number 10 for some time. So the Brains Trust inside Downing Street has been a significant figure, very influential in certain aspects of the Prime Minister's thinking, has resigned today. A letter obtained, well, not obtained, sent to The Spectator, in which she makes it clear that she believes it was wrong for the Prime Minister to imply this week that Keir Starmer was, quote, personally responsible for allowing Jimmy Savile to escape justice. There was no fair or reasonable basis for that assertion. This was not the usual cut and thrust of politics. It was an inappropriate and partisan reference to an horrendous case of child sex abuse. And she goes on, and this is where it becomes rather more contemporaneous. You tried to clarify your position today, but despite my urging, says Munira Mirza, you did not apologise for the misleading impression you gave. Will this have any repercussions politically that affect the broader populace outside of Westminster? Tom Harwood is our political correspondent who can join me now, I'm told. Tom, what do you know?
Well, Munira Mirza was not a name that many people will have known, not a household name, but an incredibly significant individual in the Number 10 operation, someone who had worked for Boris Johnson in one form or another for over a decade. Some people described her as Boris Johnson's brain, the person who was heading this policy unit in Number 10. Now, this resignation, to some extent, is a more significant event than any of the letters that we've heard about from MPs going in to the chairman of the 1922 committee. This is someone who was close to Boris, who was significant. And I hasten to suggest, and this is just conjecture on my part, that this resignation is more than the comments about Jimmy Savile. This looks to me like it is about the policy agenda and the fragility of the Number 10 operation. It's also important to note that Munira Mirza's husband is very close to Rishi Sunak, one of the people who was credited with getting Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, into politics. I wonder how many more people who may well be considered to be close to the Rishi side of things may well be sticking their heads up above the parapet in the coming days. But certainly a very significant resignation. And just one other resignation that I think we should mention, Paul Givan, the First Minister of Northern Ireland, has in the last few minutes also resigned. It's turning into a pretty seismic political afternoon.
It is. Tom, I'm glad you mentioned that. And just, if you are just tuning in, we're going to be talking to Arlene Foster, former First Minister herself, of course, about this story, which, as Tom indicates, is a hugely significant one for politics in Northern Ireland, but also in the context of Brexit and Northern Ireland Protocol, etc., etc. We knew this morning this was very likely to happen. It was well trailed and advanced the product, perhaps, of a power struggle within the ruling DUP, but nonetheless, something that we will be musing on in the company of Arlene Foster and others throughout the course of the rest of the afternoon. In the meantime, let's ponder again on Rishi Sunak. Will he be ultimately our next Prime Minister? Well, today announced that the energy price cap will rise by nearly £700, causing the average household bill to touch almost £2,000. The rise has caused some to question the government's environmental policies, particularly green levies, and the decision to ban fracking and not utilise the UK's North Sea oil, as some suggest it could be utilised. Let's debate this, whether green policies are potentially to blame partially or even fully for increasing energy prices. There's Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform UK Party, and Simon West, the managing director of the Word Forest organisation. Simon, let's give you the first chance to talk about this, and just tell us what the Word Forest organisation is for people unfamiliar with it.
We are a reforestation charity that plants trees in Kenya to try to mitigate climate change, in addition to a raft of other humanitarian measures. And we have very strong views on green issues.
And Simon, that cleared up. What would you say to those people, as I think Richard Tice is about to suggest, who suggest that our bills, the bills that we're seeing touch for the average household in the UK, annually £2,000, are made up of a chunk of subsidies that go to green levies that simply need not be there?
Well, I think it's a little disingenuous to talk about the green energy subsidies, which Energy Policy Tracker found to be around £15 billion in 2020, without covering the subsidies that go into the fossil fuel industry that would double that amount, £30 billion in the same time period. So, blaming fossil fuels is something that we all feel we need to do. If we just look at the subsidies, then fossil fuels do get far more than green energy does.
That's an interesting point. It may be a novel point for some people. Richard Tice, the old fossil fuel industries in the North Sea, they get subsidies. Why shouldn't the wind farms? Richard Tice, I'm going to halt you there, because if you can hear me, we can't hear you. We're going to try and fiddle with some buttons and see if that improves things. It may do. Let's go back, if we can, to Simon West for his thoughts. You've been given a free hit, Simon. Take advantage.
A free hit. I mean, we have committed to net zero as a country by 2050. If we continue to use fossil fuels, then how are we going to achieve that? It's simply not possible. If we invested instead in more renewables and renewable storage of energy that is brought in from solar power and wind power and all the various other renewable systems, then we can be self-sufficient in energy in a fairly short period of time. So I think to say it's renewables' fault, no. If we had all the renewables and all the storage, then we wouldn't be reliant on fossil fuels that are subject to global pressures.
Richard Tice, I think we've fixed the sound. We offer subsidies to fossil fuels. Why not to solar farms and wind turbines?
Look, it's very simple. Just look at the world evidence out there, Colin. Look at the US, where they use shale gas. Their gas prices are about half of ours. This government chose, despite their promises in their 2017 manifesto, they chose not to use the £3 trillion worth of treasure we have under our feet called shale gas. And in so doing, they went down the renewables route, and we are paying 12 to 15 billion pounds in renewable subsidies in order to increase the profits of the renewable development industry, much of which, by the way, is foreign owned, and it's completely unnecessary. So it is solely the green policies of this government that is the reason you've got these increased energy prices, Colin. And the reality is this: people suggest that it's because of the world market price. Well, if we used our own domestic energy, then the government could put in place long-term contracts. You wouldn't be exposed to those world markets. Instead, we're exposed to Putin, to Macron, and the Middle East. And I repeat that clear example of why this is so sad, so wrong, and it's the consumer who's paying. Look at the US, look at their gas prices. They're about half of ours, Colin. That's what we could do if we have shale gas industry, if we have a new nuclear industry using the small modular reactors. We can have energy prices a fraction of what they currently are, and still save CO2.
Richard, we'll just give you another go because of your sound problems. Just on that point about nuclear versus shale, I mean, the problem with the SMEs, with those small modular reactors, is that, it's unproven, to put it mildly. They may be there in 10 years, they may not. Shale, you could probably go within 3 to 5 if the political will was there to make it happen. But, there was a democratic process. There were planning inquiries. There were demonstrations. We can argue about how many people actually were there representing people in demonstrating. Nonetheless, it was
Colin,
it was a successful campaign, wasn't it? People didn't want shale.
No, Colin, exactly the opposite. The democratic process was the 2017 manifesto. The Tories were the largest party, and in that manifesto, it said they would create a whole new shale gas industry. And the Tories bottled it. They reneged on that manifesto commitment because of a few eco-zealots and a few eco-bullies, without checking out, actually, what's really going on. There are great new technologies emerging. This is a huge treasure under our feet. Rather than run for the hills, we should be exploring it in the same way that it's used successfully elsewhere in the world, such as I've quoted, in the US. And the point about the nuclear, Colin, is the Tories have been in power for almost 12 years now, and they didn't invest in nuclear. They could have done years and years ago, and it would have been ready. So all of these failures, all of these huge increases in energy prices is at the door of this Conservative administration and previous Conservative administrations. And British consumers should blame this Tory party 100% for these increases.
Simon West, I'm going to try and reheat some of the arguments around fracking, because I think for some people it will feel like today is the day to do that. And, certainly Richard Tice is of the view, many of our correspondents emailing in will be of the view, that actually it was the tail wagging the dog when it came to the decision to stop fracking. There were a relatively modest number of protesters. They were not representative of the great bulk of the British population, a British population which is now really hurting in the pocket and could do with the kind of, the sorts of prices that shale gas would have made possible and which we've seen in America.
So, yes, I would say that I think Richard is ignoring the fact that the fracking companies themselves have found that it is too expensive to extract shale gas from underneath our feet because there is nowhere near as much as was promised. And I would also ask Richard, does he disagree with the 99% of all scientists who say that anthropogenic climate change is a massive threat and is going to cost us far more? If we continue to extract fossil fuels from the ground, then anthropogenic climate change is going to cause terrible disasters. It is going to cause human migration on a scale that we have never seen before. It is going to cause crop failures. It is going to cause just an incredible amount of damage to this world, which will cost far more than the energy bills. I accept that energy bills are very high and it is hurting a lot of people. I don't think the answer is to be saying we should frack the country, we should dig up our rocks under the ground and extract the gas from them. That is dangerous and foolhardy.
Richard Tice?
This is complete nonsense. I've spoken to the fracking companies in the last couple of weeks. They are aghast. They've invested hundreds of millions of pounds so far in the UK, and they feel desperately let down and sad that we can't access this treasure. And as for the point about climate change, listen, climate change has existed since time began, millions of years, and it will continue to exist for the next million years. Of course it's right to reduce our emissions, but let me remind people that actually bringing in gas from elsewhere in the world to here and to use in the UK creates far more CO2 than if we used our own gas. I'm told a figure of about 60% more CO2 by importing gas rather than using our own. So it's completely the opposite of what the Green lobby are saying, completely the opposite. And once again, it's the least well off, the poorest in society who suffer the most at the metropolitan liberal green elite who live in their big suburban homes who can afford these increases in the bills.
Richard Tice and Simon West, there we have to leave it, I'm afraid, gentlemen. We appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Listening to that in the studio with me, Vicky Price, economist, who comes at this from that position, from the position of an economist, as opposed to two campaigners. When you listen to that, what do you think?
A number of things, in fact. I mean, first of all, one of our main problems has been that we don't have enough gas reserves, and we closed down our reserves basically a few years ago, and we're suffering from that a lot more than Europe does, even though obviously they have seen the increase in wholesale prices also hitting them. I think the second thing is that even in places where there is a lot of nuclear, like in France, they've had similar problems. The prices that consumers have to pay are enormous.
Even though they've got 75% of their electricity is provided by nuclear.
Absolutely.
In France, and they've still got these problems.
Even then, and what they have done, they have promised that prices are only going to rise by something like 4% between now and the beginning of 2023, and they're forcing EDF, which is a nuclear company, to reduce the prices, with the result that their share prices are going down. But of course, they also own a percentage of that as well. So it is uniform, even if you have a different mix. The final thing to say is about shale gas is that it's only really worth doing it when gas price is high. And for a while, we saw that in the US, they weren't really doing very much at all because it wasn't economical. There is no guarantee that the prices here are going to stay at the current level for any length of time.
People are aware of that argument about how the price fluctuates, and sometimes it's economical to shale and frack, and other times it's not. But overall, in America, and I'm not comparing America with the UK, it's undeniably led to the reshoring of thousands of jobs and much cheaper energy prices. But it's a different country.
Yes, and they're quite self-sufficient there.
Vicky Price for now. Thanks very much indeed. After the break, joined by Professor Angus Dalgleish to discuss the latest study. It seems to reveal that lockdowns reduced excess deaths by a mere 0.2%. This is from Johns Hopkins University, one of the most prestigious universities pretty much on the planet. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
Hello again. Mild today, but a big change on the way. Tomorrow it's going to feel an awful lot colder. A wet and windy spell will push across the country overnight, and that will introduce the colder and, in places, more wintry weather from this cold front. There it is, sweeping south, moving away the mild air that's been with us for a number of days and introducing much colder air, feeling colder still with the strength of the wind. There's the weather front pushing into the northwest tonight. Heavy rain for a time and some snow over the hills, and it sinks southwards into northern England and Wales, so a spell of an hour or two of heavy rain, followed by some hill snow. And the showers turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Things could turn icy here as temperatures tumble, staying mild, though, across the southeast for the time being. But as this band of wet weather sinks south across the Midlands, then into parts of East Anglia and the southeast, there could be a little bit of snow for a time. Not expected to cause too many issues, but you may see that in the morning. Ice is a bigger hazard across western Scotland and Northern Ireland, with showers here on Friday morning. And again, a mixture of sleet, hail and some snow. The snow is only really expected to build up over hills. Sunny spells for many then during Friday, but there will be showers almost anywhere. And again, they'll have a wintry flavour to them, and it will feel a lot colder. That cold feel continues through Friday evening. The showers will tend to fade, though, in most places. And then we're looking at more wet weather coming into the northwest on Saturday. As that hits the colder air, that will have a bit of snow mixed in again for a time across parts of Scotland, but looking like outbreaks of rain and drizzle for Northern Ireland, Northern England, pushing into Wales on Saturday. Much of the south and east of England staying dry and bright for most of the day. But it's going to be windy again, and that'll be the case throughout this weekend. Sunday, again, windy with a bit more patchy rain across the south, some further wintry showers across the north. Weather chopping and changing quite a bit at the moment. Bye for now.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
every day we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Momentous day in Belfast today. We've already seen the First Minister announce his resignation. That's Paul Given. Let's take you there to Belfast now. We can see Jeffrey Donaldson, Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, the leader of the DUP, who's addressing journalists right now, I believe. Let's show you. Jeffrey Donaldson, but in a sense, it's already happened. The moment of significance has passed. Paul Given resigning. The context of this, let me try and sum it up for you as briefly as I possibly can. Brexit's partly the context. Eruptions within the DUP, a power struggle, also part of the context as well. A unilateral suspension of Brexit checks on agriculture and food products coming into Northern Ireland from mainland Britain. And Paul Given's, one of his allies, Edwin Poots, who's the Agriculture Minister, ordered a halt of all checks on food entering Northern Ireland from midnight. It wasn't completely observed in the ports. Let's briefly listen to Sir Jeffrey Donaldson.
Over the last number of months, some have urged us to act in this way or that and to move with haste. Some have urged no action at all. But this party has worked to its strategic plan, whilst allowing time and space for the negotiations to take place between the government and the European Union. The government knows that the protocol does not enjoy the support of the unionist community. And Brussels can be in no doubt that the protocol has cast its long shadow over Northern Ireland's political arrangements at Stormont. The European Union told us that the protocol and its main purpose was to protect the political institutions, to protect political stability in Northern Ireland. It has had the opposite effect. It has destabilised the politics of Northern Ireland. It has upset the very delicate constitutional balance at the heart of our political arrangements. It has been a long-established norm that arrangements and agreements can only flourish when they are supported by both unionists and nationalists. Indeed, one of the most disturbing characteristics of this period is the total disregard of this principle by Brussels, by Dublin, and the protocol cheerleaders here in Northern Ireland. It's as if unionists are to be seen, but not heard. I think now is the moment when we say enough. We've had enough of being told we must stand by previous agreements, yet the same people who tell us this have destroyed a core pillar at the heart of the Belfast Agreement, the need for cross-community support. We've had enough of Sinn Féin, the SDLP and the Alliance Party seeking the rigorous implementation of a protocol which we know is a bad deal for Northern Ireland. We've had enough of governments talking about power sharing, but ignoring the fact that every elected unionist in Northern Ireland rejects the Irish Sea border. We have also had enough of Sinn Féin preaching equality, yet the Sinn Féin Culture Minister won't provide funds.
Well, it's just gone 5 o'clock, a day of high drama in the world of politics. There's the situation in Belfast, and Geoffrey Donaldson putting some flesh on the bones to explain to his supporters and others as to why the First Minister, who's a member of the DUP, has stood down today. But as you look at those pictures live from Belfast, we'll change the scene and we will go to Downing Street, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak explaining the situation with interest rates and fuel.
I'd like to talk to you all about what's happening to your energy bills and what the government is going to do to help. Following Ofgem's decision today to increase the energy price cap, I know that many of you are feeling anxious. But I want to reassure you, the plans I set out in Parliament today are going to help you and your family. Now, anyone who tells you there's an easy answer to this situation is not being straight with you. The reasons prices are rising are global. A difficult winter last year depleted global gas stores. There's been disruption to other energy sources like nuclear and wind. And we've seen higher demand for gas in Asia. All those factors are outside of the government's control. There is, in truth, nothing the British government can do about a nuclear power plant going offline in Europe or a factory in China deciding to produce more goods. But what we can do is take the sting out of the price shock as we and the world adjust to higher energy prices. Without government action, today's increase in the price cap would leave households needing to find, on average, an extra £693 this year. That is clearly a very significant sum. So, for the vast majority of families, the government is taking direct action to share the burden. Today, we're announcing an energy bills rebate worth £350. You'll receive that cash support through two different routes. First, all electricity customers will receive an upfront discount worth £200. That discount will then be automatically repaid from people's bills over the next 5 years in equal instalments of £40 a year, starting next April. This is the right way to support people while continuing with our responsible plans to reduce borrowing and debt. Second, we will pay a council tax rebate of £150 to all households in bands A to D, which covers around 4 out of every 5 households in England. The reason for doing this through the council tax system is because it's the quickest way to get monies to the families who most need it. If you're eligible, the rebate will be paid in April, and it won't need to be repaid. In total, we're helping the vast majority of families pay their energy bills with £350. Our plan is right. It is fair. And I hope it will help ease the anxiety that millions of people feel about rising energy costs by sharing the burden between us all. Thank you. I'd be very happy to take some questions. And I think first up, we've got Jonathan from the BBC. Jonathan, hi.
Thank you, Chancellor. And the support you've announced today is aimed at helping households this year. But industry experts expect high gas prices to persist. Isn't the reality that higher energy prices are here to stay and that you will have to come back with further support in future? If not, are you willing to rule that out at this point? And a follow-up, if I may, can I ask for your reaction to the resignation of the Prime Minister's head of policy, Munira Mirza, and whether you agree with her that he should apologise for his comments to Sir Keir Starmer about Jimmy Savile?
Thanks, Jonathan. So taking a step back about energy prices, as I mentioned, the factors that are driving higher gas prices are global in nature, and I went through them in my statement, and I don't have a crystal ball as to what exactly the future holds. But I want to be honest with people, higher energy prices are something that we're going to have to adjust to in common with other countries around the world, and it would be wrong to pretend otherwise. But what we can do is slow that adjustment to make it more manageable for people's household budgets, and that's what our interventions do. You're right, energy bills may go up again in October. The rebate that I announced today, the £200 off all energy bills, that will kick in October, so it will actually help with that. But over time, we'll have to see what happens. As I said, this is something that we're going to have to get used to, but the interventions today will help that adjustment happen in better time. And with regard to the news about Munira, the first thing to say is, she was a valued colleague. I very much enjoyed working with her, and I'm sorry to see her leave government. I'll miss working with her. And with regard to the comments, being honest, I wouldn't have said it, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister clarified what he meant. Next, Robert, where are you?
I'm here.
Hi.
Very good to see you. You've announced you're deploying something like £9 billion in total. Everybody will be helped a bit, but there's still going to be a price rise of 350 quid at least for everybody on average. Now, you know that it's the poorest third of people who are hurt most by these energy price rises. Why didn't you deploy that £9 billion and simply help the poorest third? If you believed in levelling up, surely that's what you would have done. And I do just want to quote a couple of lines from Munira Mozer's resignation letter. She says she believes it was wrong for the Prime Minister this week to imply that Keir Starmer was personally responsible for allowing Jimmy Savile to escape justice. There was no fair or reasonable basis for that assertion. The Prime Minister hasn't apologised. He's explained, but he hasn't said sorry. Surely he should say sorry.
Thanks, Robert. So on your first question, of course, there are choices that we have to make when we're designing a policy like this. My view was that the price rise is so significant that it's not just those families who are on benefits that are going to feel the pinch. It's actually middle-income families as well, families that are working hard, they're not on welfare, but this will be a significant increase for them. And I wanted to make sure that support we provided also went to those families. That's why we've decided to go to bands A to D, which is 4 out of every 5 households in England, very deliberately to help those families in the middle as well. So that's a deliberate choice. But if you look at what we're doing, because it's flat rate, it's a flat £200 and a flat £150, that obviously is going to mean more to a family on lower incomes or with lower energy bills. So in that sense, it is a progressive measure that will help those families more. And we have various other interventions that are also targeted at exactly the people that you rightly highlight. For example, the Warms Homes discount is a rebate that exists through energy bills. We've expanded that eligibility, or we're in the process of doing that, by a third. So that will then cover 3 million of our most vulnerable households. That's a £150 rebate. We're also spending over the course of this Parliament about £3 billion specifically targeted on the people that you mentioned to help improve the energy efficiency of their homes. Now, that's a sensible long-term thing to do, because even though it costs thousands of pounds up front, it will save those people on average about £290, £300 a year on their energy bills going forward. And of course, by cutting the universal credit taper rate, by increasing the national living wage, both of those are really significant interventions which will put more money in the pockets of those who are most vulnerable. So I think if you look at it in the round, I feel confident that we're getting help to the people who need it in different ways. And with regard to your second question, it's a question for the Prime Minister rather than me, and there's probably not much more I can add other than what I've already said, which I hope you appreciate. Next, Ed, there you are. Hi.
Chancellor, you talked a lot during the pandemic about doing whatever it takes to try and help families when they're going through difficult times. I'm just wondering, given what you said about how difficult this is going to be to confront, are you able to make the same commitment when it comes to their energy bills, whether it's looking specifically at their bills or indeed looking at things like our net zero policy and working out the way that it feeds into this? And just secondly, what's your message to people who are looking at their bills, they're looking at what you're offering them, and they're saying this simply isn't enough, and now they're contemplating a very difficult few months ahead?
I think the first thing to say is I absolutely recognise this is a difficult time. Right? I know this is this is probably the number one issue on most families' minds. They're looking at the news, they're seeing prices go up, they're worried about the cost of living, and in particular energy, and that's why we're taking action. And I really believe that what we're doing, £350, it's a significant amount of money that will make a big difference to the vast majority of households. And I think people, I hope, actually will be reassured by us stepping in to provide that support to ease some of the adjustment that this is. So, when you ask, what's our approach? Our approach over the last year or two has been to do the right things to support people through difficult times, to support the economy when it needed it. And I think today's announcement continues in that vein. And as in Robert's question, we're trying to get the balance right and getting support to the people who need it most. But I'm also being honest with everybody. I can't change global energy prices. Your point about our transition to net zero is a good one. And what we need to do is we've got to put the right long-term energy policy in place. And for example, we're investing in new nuclear power. That's something that previous governments had neglected, but we're fixing that. The Energy Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, is brilliantly getting on with that. We announced money for that in last year's spending review. We're also doing lots of offshore wind, where we're a leader. Those are sensible things to do. And lastly, we probably I want to make sure that people acknowledge that we should also exploit our domestic resources. And we have resources in the North Sea, want to encourage investment in that, because we're going to need natural gas as part of our transition to getting to net zero. And in the process of getting from here to there, if we can get investment in the North Sea, that supports British jobs, that's a good thing. So that has to be part of the mix as well. Jason from the Daily Mail. Jason, where are you? Oh, there you are.
Hi. The Bank of England says we're facing the biggest squeeze on living standards on record. Isn't this the time to think again about that national insurance rise that's going to hit average workers with an extra £250 bill this year? And on the kind of wider political picture, the PM said sorry about some of the parties that took place in this street. Some of your MPs and certainly the public are still very angry with him. You, I think, are still supporting him. Why do you think, what would you tell people about why he should be given a second chance?
So, Jason, on the first question about the health and social care levy, I do believe this is the right thing to do. If you think, what's the country's number one priority when it comes to public services, it's the NHS. And we're faced with a situation where the backlogs are growing to unacceptable levels as a result of COVID. And I think everyone wants to see action on that. We'll get to a point where almost every family will have a family member, grandparent, aunt, uncle, who's on a waiting list. And that's something that we didn't want to see happen. And at the same time, I think we wanted to do what other governments have not done. And the Prime Minister deserves credit for this. And that's grappling with the challenges in fixing social care. Both of those things are big challenges to take on. And they do require a serious amount of funding. Now, we wanted to do the difficult decision. Of course, it's a difficult decision to introduce a new levy. It's not something I would wanted to have to do, but confronted with a once in 300-year economic shock to deal with and taking on these two big challenges, I thought it was right, as did the Prime Minister and the government, to introduce a new levy to help fund the people's number one priority, not just today, but for years into the future. And I think people can be reassured that every pound of that levy is going to go on the thing they care most about, which is the NHS and social care. And the way we're doing it, I believe, is progressive. Those with the broader shoulders will bear the biggest burden from it. The top 15% of taxpayers will contribute around half of the revenues from that. And as I said, it's dedicated and specific, so people will know that all the money is going to the thing that they care most about. And on your second question, again, this question for the Prime Minister, I think he was right to say what he said in Parliament just recently and before. He's apologised for that. He said he's going to fix it. He's acknowledged all of the recommendations from Sue Gray's report, and you'll expect to hear more from them, as he said, about the changes that he's planning to make. And that's why he has my support, and I'm glad that he's doing what he's doing. Lucy from The Telegraph. There you are. Hi.
Hi, Lucy Fisher from The Telegraph. Chancellor, when you look at the levies on energy bills, the looming council tax rises, the increase in national insurance, the income tax threshold freezes, and hear the Bank of England governor warn today that the public face the biggest fall in living standards in at least 30 years, is there a point as a Conservative Chancellor that you step in and say people are paying too much tax?
Well, Lucy, you're right to list some of them, or many of the challenges that people are facing, and I very much acknowledge that we are grappling with some of them. Families are grappling with those challenges. But I think you can point to some things on the other side of the ledger as well that are going to make a difference. Obviously, the announcements today, £350 for the vast majority of families, I think is a significant amount, and it will make a difference to people. The national living wage is going up by 6.6% in April to £9.50 an hour. That's quite a significant increase. It's worth about £1,000 a year for someone earning the national living wage, as millions of people do. The universal credit taper rate cut that we announced last year, which essentially is a tax cut for those on the lowest incomes. Again, for a single mother who's working full-time on the national living wage, that's worth about £1,200 extra a year in their pocket. So that will help with frozen fuel duty, and we have, as we've discussed with Robert's question, lots of other schemes to help people in need with energy costs. So, I think, look, when I look at the picture, of course there are challenges, but there are things we were doing to help people. And to Jason's question earlier, we are making sure that we also address the other thing that they care about, which is having an NHS that's well funded, that can make sure they don't wait years and years for the treatment that they desperately want for them and their families. I think people care about that as well. Going forward, I point you to what I said at the budget in autumn last year. My goal, my mission over the remainder of this Parliament is to cut people's taxes. That's what I want to deliver. I think that's what the country would like to see. They appreciate, I would hope, that we've been through, as I said, once in a 300-year economic shock, borrowing gone to the highest level since World War II, and we do need to fix that, but we are well on our way to rebuilding our economy. If you look at what's happening with people in work and wages, business investment, all of those signs are really positive. So there's lots that we feel confident about. I know that there are some challenges ahead, but longer term, I feel confident about being able to deliver on my pledge to reduce people's taxes. And we made a start of that by cutting taxes for those on the lowest paid last autumn. And that is a sign of where we want to go in the future as well. David from Reuters. Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Chancellor, earlier today the Bank of England raised interest rates and said that wasn't just to do with higher energy costs, but also growing cost pressures and also wage pressures in the economy, and that some businesses it spoke to thought that wages might need to go up by 5% this year. And I know that last year you and the Prime Minister talked about the need for a high wage economy, but in the short term, is wage restraint something that you would welcome in the private sector and think there needs to be in the public sector?
Well, David, obviously monetary policy is independent for the Bank of England, so I'll leave Andrew and the Governor to deal with that. With regard to wages, it's not my job to set wages in the private sector, right? And all I'd say is, yes, of course I want a high wage economy. Who doesn't? The right way to get there is to drive up productivity, right? We want to make sure that those wages are a reflection of the fact that we are producing more, doing more, and the best way to get that productivity increase is to have businesses invest, and that's why we've got interventions like the super deduction, which is a very generous tax incentive for companies to invest. And we know companies are sitting on quite a bit of cash, and it'd be good for the economy if we can unlock that, get them investing. And that, if you look at all the surveys, whether it's the CBI, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, all of them point to business investment intentions being actually very high levels. So that's a promising sign for driving up growth and productivity if we can unlock investment. And then the other part of it is by investing in people, in their skills. And the spending review last year, we announced, I think, a £3.5 billion increase in the amount of money that we spend on skills. It's a 26% real increase. So it's almost unprecedented for a parliament to spend that much more on skills. But it's really important. So if you're an adult who doesn't have a level 3 qualification, for example, it's equivalent of an A level, and there are about 9 or 10 million adults in our country who don't, for the first time, actually, the government at any age that you are will fully fund you to get one of those qualifications. That cost about £3,000, but we know it will make an enormous difference to your chance of getting a job, or if you're in work, earning more as a result of those new skills you acquire. And that's just one of the many things we're doing. There's traineeships, apprenticeships, sector-based work academies, skill boot camps. All of these things are new interventions that will help people get the skills they need to get higher productivity, higher wage jobs. That's the right long-term approach for us to get there. Look, of course, it doesn't happen overnight, but I'm confident we're doing all the right things that put us on that path to getting there over time.
Thomas from Business Insider. Thomas.
Chancellor.
The plan to give energy rebates to households in certain council tax bands means 2.2 million of people on lowest incomes won't automatically benefit. Meanwhile, many of those in the highest household incomes will benefit. Do you accept it's a poorly targeted tax basing it on property values from 30 years ago? And secondly, just to follow up, would you welcome a full apology from the Prime Minister regarding his comments to Keir Starmer earlier this week?
So, Thomas, on your second question, I haven't got anything to add to what I've said to the previous answers. But on your first question, I probably don't accept that. Look, there's no perfect way when you design policy that has to work on this scale for it to be perfectly targeted, right? So there's no way to perfectly do it. I can't sit here and figure out the individual circumstances of all 28 million households that we're trying to get support to. So I accept that nothing is perfect. But to your point specifically about lower income households who happen to live in higher council tax bands, that is a reasonable question, and we have looked at that specifically, and that's why we've created a discretionary fund of about £150 million that will be given to local authorities specifically to help exactly those people. Now, by our estimates, there are around 300,000 people actually, so for example, who are on low income or on benefits, who happen to live in council tax bands higher than Band D. So we've actually given more than the money needed for them, so that there's a bit of extra cushion, so that local authorities can find those people and get them the support they need. I think that's very fair, but we've made a provision for that, as I said, through this discretionary fund. And other than that, I think the council tax system is a good way to deliver support. It's the only other part of our entire tax system that works on a household basis, and if you think about it, you pay energy bills as a household, so this is a way to think about people as a household, so that's sensible. And the other thing is it's quick. Right, lots of other things take a long time to figure out. For example, the rebate, that will kick in October because there's statutory consultations and operational things to work through. The council tax system is really fast. Councils do a brilliant job for us. The systems are set up so people will feel that £150 in April, and that's really good, I think, actually, and that's one of the benefits of using that system to do that. And I think I've got a bit of time to take a couple more if I'm being not hurried out. So I don't know who we've got here. Is Natasha here or not? Natasha, do you have a question? There you are. Hi.
Yeah, sorry to press you on the Munira Mirza question. Do you think the Prime Minister should say sorry for his comments? Do you feel it would help to move on from the whole situation? Can I just ask you, some of your colleagues have said that you're, Labour light and unconservative. You're raising taxes and giving people money to pay their energy bills. Do you agree with them?
Natesh, thanks. Look, so on your first question again, I just have to repeat what I've said before. Obviously, that's for the Prime Minister to decide, but I'm glad he clarified what he meant earlier today. And as I said, I'll miss working with Munira. To your second question, look, for me, being a Conservative, part of that is about being responsible with people's money and being responsible with the public finances. That's really important to me. I think that's what people expect, quite frankly, from a Conservative government and from a Conservative Chancellor. I think I'd hope that people understand we were faced with an enormous shock, and that meant that borrowing skyrocketed up to levels that we haven't seen since World War II, and it's going to take us a little bit of time to fix that. But fixing it is the right thing to do. It's the responsible thing to do. It's not always easy to do these difficult things, but as long as I have this job, I'm going to try and do what I believe to be right in the long-term interests of the country. And actually, this energy situation is a good example of why it's important, because as I've made the case previously to you and others, that we need to have the resilience to respond to future shocks. And look, if you think in the last 10 years, we've had two supposedly once-in-a-century events. We had the financial crisis, which Robert spent every minute covering, and Ed and others. And then we had, obviously, coronavirus. They happened in the space of a decade. I was really fortunate that because my predecessors had taken some difficult decisions when they had this job, I was able to respond comprehensively and generously to support the country, families, businesses through that crisis. And now, again, we're faced with another thing with energy. I want to be able to respond. And because we've taken some difficult decisions already to get things in a better place, I can do that. But I want whoever's in this job in the future to hopefully have benefited from the tough things that I did so that they can support the country when the time comes again. And I think that is a deeply Conservative thing to do. I think people understand we have to live within our means. I think they get that. They'd expect that from us. And that's what I will deliver as long as I'm doing this. George, I saw you had your hand up.
George Parker from the FT. You're seeing the analysts saying that they think it's possible the energy price cap could go up to as high as £2,400 in October. Could you exclude now the possibility you'll have to do even more in the autumn to help families? And just a second one, again on Munira Mirza. You said you enjoyed working with her. I just wondered if you just say what you thought she brought to the government.
Right. So on your first question, as I said before, there's global forces at play here that drive up gas prices at the moment, and I don't have a crystal ball. You're right, the current energy markets are forecasting that prices go up further in October before falling quite significantly next spring. But again, I don't have a crystal ball and these things are uncertain. I think the interventions we've done today are designed to last and provide support to people over the year. We're front loading it, so the £150 of the £350 comes all in one go at the beginning. But then in October, let's say the price cap does go up again, then that's when the £200 rebate will also kick in at that moment. So there will be help at that time if that is indeed what happens. So I think over the course of a year is the best way to think about it. There's £350 of support for the vast majority of families to help them over the year with this. And again, I'll just go back to what I said. I've got to be honest, I don't want to pretend that we don't have to adjust to higher energy prices, if that's what the world is having to do. But what we can do is just slow the pace of that down, make it more manageable for people's household finances. And I'm not going to get into a big thing about Munira. So she's a valued colleague. She brought a lot to the job, and I'll miss working with her. Great. Yes. If I've got one more, right? Go on. Yeah.
Hi, Simon Neville from PA. Just want to get my head around this. I'm not going to call it a bailout, but I think some people have called it that. Energy firms were asking for a similar package for quite a few months. We've known that the energy prices were going to go up for quite some time. Back then, it was rejected. The call, I think 20 billion was the number that was put on it by the firms. What changed that meant now you decided it was the right call to make? And the other question I wanted to ask was around national insurance. You're giving households the opportunity to delay their payments on their energy bills. Why not give them the opportunity to delay their payments for national insurance?
So I think in terms of the difference, they're two very different things, right? We're putting in place a new dedicated health and social care levy so that people can feel reassured that every pound of that is going to the thing that they care most about, which is the NHS. And it means we can make a start on tackling the backlogs as quickly as possible and start reforming social care. I think that's the right thing to do, the responsible thing to do, as I've outlined. But where we can make a difference on these energy prices, we are. And part of the response is to smooth the impact of that. And that is a very deliberate policy approach. As it can't pretend that we don't have to adjust to it, but what we can do is just make it more manageable, and that's what that policy does. With regard to your first question, I wouldn't describe it as a bailout, and I think actually what that was is something very different. We are not providing loans to energy companies. Well, what we are doing is discounting people's bills by £200. We're using their energy bill as a means to do that, but in no way, shape or form is this a bailout of energy companies. It's absolutely not. This is help to families, to households, just delivered through their energy bills and then ultimately recovered through their energy bills in the future. So I think it's very different to what some people were calling for. And I think it's the right intervention. And many have called for some smoothing mechanism, because when you're faced with a shock of this magnitude, the sensible thing for governments to do, as I said, is not to pretend that it doesn't exist, but to help ease the burden of it by spreading it over some years. But look, thank you all very much. That was hopefully helpful, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Interesting. Rishi Sunak there with some comments that will interest those in Westminster and beyond. A little bit of context. On Monday, the Prime Minister accused Keir Starmer of, quote, failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile, the child sex abuser, when Keir Starmer was in charge of the CPS, the Criminal Prosecution Service. He was the Director of Public Prosecutions. The PM earlier today seemed to resile from some of that, distanced himself from some of those comments. But as Robert Peston said, one of the journalists in that gathering of journalists, he didn't apologise. And wasn't it interesting when Rishi Sunak said, when asked what he would have done, well, he said, I wouldn't have said it. Crikey. Let's turn to Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, who joins us from Blackpool as part of our North West Week. Darren, welcome to you. What do you read into that?
Yeah, indeed, Colin, fascinating. Drawing a distinct line, I would suggest, isn't it, about what he would have done and what the Prime Minister decided to do. When asked whether he would have made those comments, he said, being honest, I wouldn't have said it, and I'm glad the Prime Minister clarified what he meant. Quite extraordinary, really. That is a big marker of essentially saying, you know what, I wouldn't have gone where the Prime Minister has gone. We know, of course, earlier on in the week that Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, had branded this the kind of, that's what politics is, the kind of rough and tumble of politics, if you like. Now, that clearly was not enough for the head of policy at Downing Street, who resigned over this issue this afternoon. Pretty clear that she had made clear to the Prime Minister not to use this slur in the Commons on Monday. He did. She clearly then wanted him to apologise for it. He did not, even though he did essentially change his tone today in regard to that, saying that personally he would not have, it wasn't a personal attack on Keir Starmer. But this is very, very difficult for the Prime Minister. She's been around for a long time. She's a very valued aide. She worked when he was Mayor of London for a long period of time. She's seen as kind of one of the sensible people inside Downing Street, one of the grown-ups. And her resignation will be a bitter blow, not just to Downing Street, but I think to the Prime Minister personally. Andrew Griffith, who's a Conservative MP, is stepping into the breach for the time being. But this is the last thing the Prime Minister needs, frankly, when he's got many of his own MPs handing in letters asking for a leadership challenge. And we come back to this point, Colin. In many ways, this is a mess of the Prime Minister's own making again. He didn't need to say those remarks on Monday. He went ahead and done so, and he's now lost a key member of his staff, and he's got his Chancellor saying that those are comments that he himself would not have made.
For now, thanks very much indeed. Darren McCaffrey there. Vicky Pricey, economist, is alongside me. Vicky, I want to talk about economics and the cost of living crisis. The journalist in me wants to talk to you about Munira Mirza. So you decide, maybe. What's it going to be?
A mix of both, if I may.
You can.
Because obviously the policy unit looks wider than just politics and also looks at what will make this government do better in the future. And one of those things is the economy doing well. So I'm pretty certain she was quite aware of all this and some of the policies that we have seen that certainly Boris Johnson has been talking about, which is how to reinvigorate the economy and so on, would be coming from her. And a lot of what Rishi Sunak has been doing in terms of putting loads of money into the economy would have been agreed by Boris Johnson too, and of course his policy unit. So it is a loss from that point of view. On the other hand, I mean, what you've seen today is a continuation of those policies for the moment, which is basically let's get people to have enough money in their pockets, as they did with the furlough scheme and everything else, so that they can feel a little bit more confident to continue to go out spending. Without that, we're going to see the economy actually doing, not as well as anyone had been forecasting at all. So the two, politics and economics, I'm sorry to have to say, are linked. And it'll be interesting to see whether any change, whether temporary or permanent, in that position will make a difference.
They're almost embodied. That linkage is embodied between number 10 and number 11. There is Rishi Sunak, the bookie's favourite to be Prime Minister if Boris Johnson falls. One of the pesky journalists there said, but you're Labour light, Chancellor. If he is to be crowned the next Conservative leader, there will be some Tories who don't like the cut of his jib. He spends too much money. He's not dry enough.
Well, the truth is, if he hadn't spent that money, like all other countries have done as well, then we would be in a much worse position. And certainly the rating that people give to the Conservatives would have been even lower than where it is now. And as we know, it has dropped a little bit in recent months. So I think they needed the growth, and Rishi Sunak was able to do it. He's been able to borrow quite substantially without the markets really worrying. And that's been good news, I think, for the economy as a whole. And even the Bank of England, which raised rates now, contributed significantly by putting a lot of money into the economy in terms of extra liquidity.
Do you think he'll be the next Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak?
I really haven't got a clue.
What a very direct answer. How refreshing. Thanks very much indeed. More from Vicky Price a little later on. We've got the news bulletin coming up. If we can find the scripts, Polly will bring you the latest from the news desk. Coming up right now.
All the scripts right here. It's just after 5:30. I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. Your headlines.
The Chancellor has been answering questions on the energy price cap increase in Downing Street within the last half hour. Rishi Sunak said the domestic energy bill plan is right and fair. Millions of households are to be given £350 to ease the burden of rising costs, as the regulator, Ofgem, announced a 54% rise on the price cap in domestic fuel. Take a look at these figures. Those on default tariffs paying by direct debit will see their bills go up by nearly £700, and prepayment customers face annual charges of more than £2,000. The changes will be introduced on the 1st of April. Northern Ireland's First Minister Paul Givan has quit today, saying, "Today marks the end of what has been the privilege of my lifetime." The move comes amid increasing tensions over the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Officials have been ordered to stop agri-food checks, which the EU says is a breach of international law. And it's been quite a day for resignations. The head of Number 10's policy unit and Boris Johnson's aide for 14 years, Munira Mirza, has resigned. That comes after the Prime Minister claims Sir Keir Starmer, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile. In a letter to Boris Johnson, supported by the Spectator newspaper, she wrote it was wrong to imply Sir Keir Starmer was personally responsible. Asked about Boris Johnson's comments, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak within the last half hour said, "Being honest, I wouldn't have said that." But he added he was glad the Prime Minister had clarified what he meant. And the Bank of England has raised interest rates to 0.5% and signalled more hikes are on the way as it tries to curb inflation. That marks the central bank's first back-to-back increase since June 2004. And on the international stage, US President Joe Biden said the ISIS leader is no more after a raid in Syria. Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi reportedly detonated a bomb just as US forces approached during an overnight raid. He killed himself, 13 others, including his own wife and children. There were no US casualties reported. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. We're back after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, the lobby group Migration Watch UK has launched a petition calling on the government not to stop publishing daily totals of people arriving in the UK via the English Channel in small boats. The Home Office reportedly preparing to ditch the publication of daily figures. We've been sharing them with you every day of illegal crossings, which Migration Watch says amounts effectively to a cover-up. Well, Alp Mehmet is the CEO of Migration Watch. I'm delighted to say he is here alongside Vicky Price, who isn't an economist, may have a different perspective on migration, illegal or otherwise. But Alp, you're not happy with the Home Office, and it fails the sniff test straight away because these numbers are embarrassing.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to get even more embarrassing if the present trend, 6 times more this month than we had in January last year. So we're really looking at some serious numbers come the end of the year. How's the Home Office going to deal with them? It's already very costly, and a lot more than we initially heard yesterday when we were told that housing a lot of those coming across the channel.
But just on this point, the Home Office has clarified today, they've given a figure, they've corrected a figure they gave yesterday for the cost of housing in hotels, asylum seeker applicants. It's actually for over £4 million a day.
£1.7 billion a year. And that was because of a drafting error, some error. I'm sure when Vicky was a civil servant, she would never have allowed that sort of mistake to be made. She would never have made that mistake herself. And that is really what it's all about. As far as I'm concerned, openness is about democracy. The moment we lose that, I'm afraid we start questioning our democratic right to govern in the way that we want to be governed.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant, Vicky Price, as the old saying goes, but actually as an economist, you know, data is gold, isn't it? You can't forge policy decisions without the right data.
Well, somebody does have the data. The question is whether they publish it. So policy decisions can still be made without any of us, of course, knowing what's happening. And I'm in great agreement that we need to know data as much as possible. The only issue is whether some of the way in which it is reported ends up sort of inflaming sort of worries about, all these people.
One person's inflaming as another person's engaging, isn't it?
That sort of thing.
It drives part of our news agenda, but that's partly driven because people are worried about it. They're worried about the fact that we do not know who is coming into our country on these small boats. We do know, as Alp suggests, the numbers are increasing really sharply. There are various projections, and year on year it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And as I say, there is no sense of where these people are going, what their purpose may be. There may be great positive contributions to our economy and society. They may be here to do us harm. We just don't know.
Well, all that needs to be possibly debated a little bit more because on balance, if you look at what's been happening with migration over a number of years, migration has been helpful to this economy. But what clearly is going on right now is that lots of legal routes for migration are not happening in a way that then can ensure these people get assimilated to society and contribute in terms of work and so on. That's where the benefit, if you like, comes. And that isn't really open at present, or at least it isn't as open as used to be the case. And I think that's what's perhaps confusing people when they look at the data. But it would be good to know what's happening and also why that data isn't going to be available.
Look, inflaming, if openness inflames an issue, then I'm afraid so be it. We've got to discuss it. As for legal routes and migration and how much that's contributed, what we're talking about now is illegal migration. And it's not true to say that we haven't had people coming in along regular routes. 184,000 since 2004. Apart from the net migration of millions during that time. So it's not as if people are not able to come to this country. All we are saying is, A, we should know how many are coming, and B, it should be in a much more measured way. But that's not the channel. The channel is about illegal immigration, and I'm afraid unless we deal with it, they are going to continue going up in numbers, and that is not sensible.
Mehmet, on the central point that Vicky Price makes, that immigration is in and of itself a good thing, and that's become an article of faith, I think it's reasonable to say, in liberal democracies. And we look at Rishi Sunak, we've just been watching him, he may be our next Prime Minister. Not indigenous, his family originally came from India.
Look at Vicky, look at Alp Mehmet, of course, and no one, this is the problem, that the moment anyone says, let's have some controlled immigration, let's have sensible immigration, you're immediately labelled a xenophobe, someone who is against anti-immigration. That is not true. We are in favour of immigration, but sensible at the sort of rate and scale that we can cope with. At the moment, we can't.
And that's where we're going to leave what continues to be a raging debate, that's for sure. Alt Mehmet and Vicky Price, I know you can stay with us for a little bit more of the stories we're covering today, but for now, thanks very much indeed. We are looking now at a massive study, a really big study from one of America's most prestigious universities. It has revealed that the original coronavirus lockdowns had little to no effect on pandemic death tolls in the US, UK and Europe. Economists from Johns Hopkins University carried out a meta-analysis. It found that restrictions imposed in the spring of 2020, including stay-at-home orders, compulsory masks and social distancing, only reduced COVID deaths by a mere 0.2%. Let's turn to Professor Angus Dalgleish, a regular contributor here and somebody who doesn't always toe the party line. I think that's probably fair to say. Professor, thanks very much indeed. What did you make of this study?
Well, I was interested to see that you say I don't toe the party line, and I'm very proud to say that's because we're usually right. And right at the beginning, we said that this lockdown would achieve very little, and the knock-on effects of it, which I mentioned before, all the other patients who didn't get treated, etc., that this would actually be a disaster. This study has been really interesting because it shows that there was only about 100 people, if you extrapolate those figures, in the UK who died because of a lockdown. And if it hadn't been, rephrase it, only 100 people would have died of COVID had it not been for the lockdown. And here you also have to bear in mind that the COVID figures, the people who died only of COVID, out of the 150,000 which are down there registered, it's only about 17,000. So it may even be less than that. And we already know that we're talking between 50,000 and 700,000 of people who are going to die or have died as a direct effect of the lockdown, either because they didn't go to the doctor, they didn't get screened, etc., for all the other conditions they've had. So I am delighted and slightly surprised that this is so definitive across America, Britain and Europe, and that right from the very beginning, I trusted Angus Turgell, who was the Swedish equivalent of Whitty, who said that we don't need to lock down over this. We just need to give advice and let people be sensible amongst themselves. And I and everybody else who signed the Great Barrington Declaration, we were absolutely adamant in our beliefs and our experiences from our relative disciplines that this was the right thing to do. But oh no, it was bulldozed. We know from our own lockdown that, it was totally unnecessary in retrospect. You could see that the death rates were falling off a cliff 4 days before we actually introduced our lockdown. And so we really all, I believe, suffer terribly for no justification at all. I'm just delighted such a definitive, authoritative study has been done, and that hopefully from this we will never have to suffer hopelessly useless lockdowns ever again.
Yeah, and it does feel like the worm is turning. I was talking to Sunetra Gupta, co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration a fortnight ago, and there was a feeling from her, certainly, that she was, though she bore the scars, she was beginning to win the argument. Without wanting to disappear too much down the rabbit hole of academic politics, this study comes from Johns Hopkins University. I was in danger of mispronouncing that, but Johns Hopkins University, prestigious university. The academic concerned who's assembled this metadata study says he's been hung out to dry to some degree, which may or may not be true, but the mere fact we know this has happened and he's still at the university says, does that not say something about academic freedom?
It does, because as I discovered very early on, when I pointed out what I thought was the blindingly obvious fact that if you looked at the sequence of the virus, that it was not natural and it clearly had been engineered and most likely escaped. I mean, not only was I hung out to dry, but it was completely, utterly ignored, sent to Siberia, basically, academically. And nobody would even engage in the debate. They just said flippant things. They'd taken a narrative. Everybody's taken a narrative about it. They've taken the narrative that it was a natural bat-to-human virus, taken the narrative the only way to control this is because the Chinese went in for lockdown, so we'll go in for lockdown. They took the narrative from Tony Fauci that you must do no treatment, we'll have a vaccine program and then it has to be vaccine, don't bother about treatment. The narrative of this was really quite dreadful. And then
Angus, we're going to let you answer the phone. It might be Anthony Fauci offering you a job, who knows? We'll say thanks very much indeed, Professor Angus Dalgleish. Yes, not very likely, I don't think. Now, the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, BAFTA, has unveiled its award nominations. The sci-fi epic Dune boasts an all-star cast. It's wonderful. I do hope you get to see it if you haven't seen it already. Leading the nominations for this year's BAFTA Film Awards for Best Film, 11 nominations actually in total. The Power of the Dog, Gothic Western, starring... two words that not normally appear together, Gothic Western, starring Benedict Cumberbatch as a menacing cowboy. That got 8 nominations. Sir Kenneth Branagh's Belfast. I saw it last night. It's wonderful. It's a retelling of his childhood in Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, Daniel Craig's final Bond outing, No Time to Die, secured 5 nominations, including Outstanding British Film. The showbiz reporter Hayley Palmer is alongside Vicky Price and me today to reflect on those films. Should we do them in the order we just did them? I loved Dune. Did you?
Yeah, absolutely. What an iconic film. What did you think?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, you haven't seen it yet? It's a must-see. It is. But how exciting. And it's coming up on the 13th of March. It's hosted this year by Rebel Wilson at the Royal Albert Hall. And I just think it's such a great lineup of nominees this year. Isn't it exciting? I can't wait to see what happens.
Well, I think that, June, all-star cast, etc. But it was a thing of beauty to watch, wasn't it? I saw the original, read the book originally, the Frank Herbert book.
Did you?
Loved that.
Yeah.
The kids loved it. So there's a broad appeal there. Take us through some of the other films as well. June is I think deserves 11 nominations. What else?
Yeah, we've got to go first up with that. Don't Look Up. A lot of the critics haven't rated this, but the public love it. It's an iconic movie, amazing satire on today's news and social media twist what's happening. So
I was going to say,
Vicky
Price has given me the look where she just did this little brush of the fingers, which I think meant you haven't seen it.
Exactly, but I know all about it though.
You know all about it?
Oh yes, of course. The children would talk about it, so including some of the other movies, so they've seen the lot. Yeah. I have only seen the James Bond one, for which I apologise, in an open-air theatre cinema in Greece. Oh, wow. That was the best place to watch it.
Well, we can't beat that. I went to the premiere, actually, at the Royal Albert Hall. So we're close there, but not quite there.
So close,
but
except for
what a film. Did you enjoy the film?
I enjoyed it. Well, I just wasn't very keen on the end of it, really.
Yeah.
No. But apart from that, it was all right.
And Gothic Westerns, help us. You don't get many Gothic Westerns. The Benedict Cumberbatch film, that's got a few nominations as well.
Yes, it has, hasn't it? I'm not sure how many exactly it's got. I haven't got that one down on my list, but it's about 5, yes, fantastic. And of course, Licorice Pizza. I haven't actually seen that film. You've seen that one.
So how about that?
There we go.
Well, give us your potted review, Vicky
loved
Price.
it. Absolutely loved it from beginning to end.
Yeah,
I had a friend who went to see it, thought it was the worst thing, left halfway through.
There we go. We've all got different opinions, haven't we? Exactly.
We'll get through some more films, hopefully we've got time, but I just want to make this broad point. Vicky Price, you're an economist, cinema, the creative arts, massive net contributors to the British economy, employ tens of thousands of people. If you look at that sort of golden triangle north of the M25 in Hertfordshire, places like that, huge amount of money coming in from this. Lockdown was a disaster for the cinema, our cinema industry. Are we looking at these films and thinking, it's back, cinema's back?
Yes, I really think it is. I just feel like people want that escape. They want to get back out there. Same with theatres as well. People have had enough of sitting indoors. They just want to get out and buy their ticket and go to the cinema. So I'm all for it, and I just think it's wonderful to see. So
at the same time, though, what has happened with COVID is that the games industry has overtaken cinemas and streaming and everything, which is extraordinary because people just connect that way. And what is now being paid to acquire games or companies that produce those games, all this creative stuff, which is apparently incredibly good. I've never done it, but again, my kids do, and their kids do. So there's a lot of that. But that is now taking over. So what do you see is this sort of a bit like working going back to the office or not. It's this hybrid thing.
Yeah.
So people are going out and taking their pleasure in all sorts of different ways, which I think is wonderful in many ways.
Hayley, can we just talk a little bit about Kenneth Branagh's Belfast? I saw it last night. For anybody who's not seen it, it's beautifully shot, it's beautifully filmed. It's based on his childhood in Belfast. It's set in 1960.
I mean, that's really what's
but no, that's the words that spring to mind for me. Just like I say, powerful and I
was trying to work out yesterday in what was a pretty full theatre for Belfast, Kenneth Branagh's Belfast. Is it about nostalgia? I mean, I watched it. I'm 53. There's a scene where Jude Hill picks up his attaché case full of little toy cars, little matchbox cars, and I turned to my friend and said, "I used to have one of those," and it felt like this lovely warm bath of nostalgia.
And I think that's what it's about, isn't it? When you watch a film and you feel like that, I think that's a special moment and that's what's relatable. And I wanted to flag up, actually, Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
She's got a nomination for House of Gucci, followed up her amazing performance, of course, of A Star Is Born. Just wonderful. I think she's going from strength to strength. I really do. And I'm really excited to see what happens with that.
And what you're not going to do, Hayley Palmer, is ask Vicky Price whether she's seen that film, because we all know the answer.
We all know the answer to that one.
Both very much indeed for being here.
Pleasure.
We appreciated your contributions. The big story, however, today, not to do with the film industry, not even really to do with the cost of living crisis. It's to do with Munira Mirza, the policy chief at Number 10, who has this afternoon announced her resignation. More on that story coming up. Stay with us.
Hello again. Mild today, but a big change on the way. Tomorrow it's going to feel an awful lot colder. A wet and windy spell will push across the country overnight, and that will introduce the colder and, in places, more wintry weather from this cold front. There it is, sweeping south, moving away the mild air that's been with us for a number of days and introducing much colder air, feeling colder still with the strength of the wind. There's the weather front pushing into the northwest tonight. Heavy rain for a time and some snow over the hills, and it sinks southwards into northern England and Wales, so a spell of an hour or two of heavy rain, followed by some hill snow. And the showers turning more and more wintry across the northwest. Things could turn icy here as temperatures tumble. Staying mild, though, across the southeast for the time being. But as this band of wet weather sinks south across the Midlands, then into parts of East Anglia and the southeast, there could be a little bit of snow for a time. Not expected to cause too many issues, but you may see that in the morning. Ice is a bigger hazard across western Scotland and Northern Ireland, with showers here on Friday morning. And again, a mixture of sleet, hail and some snow. The snow is only really expected to build up over hills. Sunny spells for many then during Friday, but there will be showers almost anywhere. And again, they'll have a wintry flavour to them and it will feel a lot colder. That cold feel continues through Friday evening. The showers will tend to fade, though, in most places. And then we're looking at more wet weather coming into the northwest on Saturday. As that hits the colder air, that will have a bit of snow mixed in again for a time across parts of Scotland, but looking like outbreaks of rain and drizzle for Northern Ireland, Northern England, pushing into Wales on Saturday. Much of the south and east of England staying dry and bright for most of the day. But it's going to be windy again, and that'll be the case throughout this weekend. Sunday, again, windy with a bit more patchy rain across the south, some further wintry showers across the north. Weather chopping and changing quite a bit at the moment. Bye for now.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight.